So with the little Bungie has shared of Void 3.0 so far, we have to make a lot of assumptions. And by a lot, I mean all the assumptions in order to even start thinking about, let alone planning any future builds. But I'm stubborn, so I started to lay it all out. But after 10 minutes, I was already beginning to lose it. We have to make so many guesses about what Bungie is doing that it's almost impossible to even compute. The first fork in the road I hit was the Voidwalker charged grenade abilities. If you keep all three as they are now, then you have either three aspects or fragments that simply can't work with each other. Stasis doesn't currently have a limitation like this. Sure, there's some fragments you could pick that would have no synergy with your build, but how are you supposed to both charge a grenade, consume one, and also charge it into a handheld supernova?
Well, we're waiting.
Are some of these going away, becoming intrinsic perks, being combined? Does Top Tree's charge grenades become the standard grenade? Maybe handheld supernova becomes a grenade you just pick? How many aspects and fragments will Void have in total? I mean, the same as Stasis? How many melees will we get? Bungie already introduced a new one, but they also mentioned some abilities and mechanics will go away where it makes sense. So following that thought process, I could see the Devour melee being removed, having been replaced with the new range melee they teased, Pocket Singularity. Dark Matter and Devour are both very similar, so I could see them being combined into an aspect, but I can't see them getting rid of consuming a grenade to start Devour. So it all comes back to how they'll handle having potentially three competing grenade charging abilities. Do you see what I mean? There's still too many questions and assumptions we'd have to make to really get going. So let's first just stop and review what we actually do know. So back in August, Bungie gave us our first peek at the light subclass rework, starting with Void 3.0, set to launch with Witch Queen. I'm not going to read the whole post, you can do that on your own, but here are the key takeaways. Number 1. All the light subclasses are getting the Stasis treatment, starting with Void, meaning selecting aspects, fragments, grenades, but unlike Stasis, you also get to pick between various supers and melees. Number 2, there will be new abilities and mechanics added, of which Bungie has already shared a few. Number 3, Bungie will also remove old abilities and mechanics where it makes sense. And number 4, which is the most exciting in my opinion. They are also setting up the framework for the systemic integration of the Void damage type into the rest of the game, much like they did with Stasis. They describe this as shared combat behaviors or verbs that interact with each other, such as slow, freeze, and shatter does for Stasis. These verbs will appear in other places outside of the subclasses, such as on weapon perks, exotic armor, and mods from your seasonal artifact. So Void will have 3 negative status effects that you'll be applying to enemies. The first of which is suppression. Think Titan suppression grenades or shield bash. And from the sneak peek, it looks like all 3 classes may gain access to at least some of the other classes' grenades, as we see a Warlock throw a suppressor and a Hunter throw a scatter grenade. The second negative effect is weaken. Think Hunter tether debuff or the previous artifact mod Oppressive Darkness. The third negative effect is volatile. The target is afflicted with unstable void energy and will explode upon taking additional damage or on death. This sounds like Titan's Control Demolition and Tactical Strike, but it also sounds like Warlock's Bloom effect. I can see this being added as a universal fragment that all classes could use. In addition to the negative effects, Void will also have 3 positive effects you'll be able to apply to yourself and allies. The first positive effect is the Void Overshield. Think the Sentinel Titan's shield from Defensive Strike. The second is invisibility, of which hunters currently have 3 ways to activate with dodge, smoke grenades, and flawless execution. Lastly, we have Devour. Warlocks currently have the Devour melee, but can also consume their grenade to buff themselves with Devour. Now, currently the positive effects are class specific, but here is a key line from the TWAB. Each class will specialize in a few of these verbs, but it will be possible to dabble in the rest by coordinating with your fire team, or with certain combinations of abilities and fragments. That second part leaves a lot of room for interpretation and speculation. They also mentioned spreading existing abilities to create enticing new combinations. Now this line was interesting, as it could just be reiterating being able to take abilities that were previously on separate nodes and combine them as aspects and fragments, but they could also be talking about spreading around mechanics that were class specific, such as Devour, Invisibility, and Overshield. I'm leaning towards the former so that we can preserve the 3 classes' unique identities. I hope they don't become too homogenized. Also, How scary would an invisible Titan with an overshield be? We could honestly speculate for hours on the possibilities, but my gut is telling me that each class will more or less retain their current identity and be able to apply 2 to 3 debuffs in just one of the positive effects. So for Warlocks, I'm guessing this will be the Weaken and Volatile debuffs plus the Devour buff. Titans might specialize in Suppression, Volatile, and Overshields, while Hunters may get Suppression, Weaken, and Invisibility. But again, with what Bungie mentioned, there could be more overlap between the classes, or additional or different negative effects for each. We're just going to have to wait and see. Bungie also shared a couple of new abilities for each class, which will help inform some of our speculation. For Warlock specifically, we get Pocket Singularity, which is a new projectile melee that pushes targets away from the blast and makes them volatile. This sounds an awful lot like the Scion ability that shoots along the ground and launches you into the air. So I'm rather looking forward to giving new players a taste of the Callus encounter. Next, they shared an aspect, Child of the Old Gods. Man, that just sounds metal. When you cast your Rift, you summon a sentient black hole which hovers at your side, waiting for a target. It will launch itself at enemies, then begin siphoning their energy and weakening them, refunding their life force back to you as either grenade and melee energy if you're using a healing rift, or as health if you're using an empowering rift. Defeating enemies who are being siphoned by the child will refund some rift energy. Okay, so now it's time to pop the red pill and see just how deep this rabbit hole goes. So with Stasis as a blueprint and the 3 example void aspects they shared, we can make some educated guesses on potential aspects. But again, you'll see this gets really tricky with the little information we have to go on, but I just can't help myself from thinking about the possibilities. So to keep things simple and not travel too far down the hole like the last Matrix movie, let's follow the Stasis example of 4 aspects, looking at the existing Voidwalker nodes and see what makes sense as an aspect and what might become a fragment. So they already gave us the first aspect, Child of the Old Gods. Other possible aspects could be Chaos Accelerant, Dark Matter, or Feed the Void. But let me stop right there. Can you already see the problem here? I already mentioned it, but if we keep Chaos Accelerant, Feed the Void, and Handhold Supernova, we would have 3 competing grenade charging aspects that just couldn't be run together. Which leads me back to Bungie mentioning they would remove old abilities and mechanics where it made sense. So then, what makes sense? Well, first of all, I think the Devour melee itself has the potential to be removed, as Bungie already teased the new range Pocket Singularity melee, and I don't think they'll be giving each class 4 melees to choose from, but that's just my gut feeling. Dark Matter and Devour are both very similar in nature. They both heal and they both return grenade energy, and with Devour already being name dropped as a positive buff Void will have, I believe Dark Matter in its current form will more or less go away, although it could become the name of an aspect that applies the Devour effect on Void ability kills. Alright, so back to Chaos Accelerant and Feed the Void. Does one have to go? If the Devour melee itself goes, then we still need a way to proc Devour, and consuming the grenade is too pivotal an ability to be removed. So one solution is both Chaos Accelerant and Feed the Void are kept, and Bungie doesn't allow you to pick them together, which I admit would be too clunky. So instead, I could see Chaos Accelerant becoming a fragment that just naturally enhances your grenades without having to charge them. Which, if Feed the Void was an aspect, you could combine both abilities, which would be kinda cool. But that still leaves Handheld Supernova, which could just be made into its own grenade selection, but then it loses the charged effect, which isn't ideal as it loses interaction with Controverse Hold. The only other clean solution I could think of would be a different input method, so you could choose to either consume, overcharge, or turn it into a Handheld Supernova. If all 3 become aspects, then you'd only need 2 input methods, assuming we can only choose 2 aspects like Stasis. Yeah, like I said, there's just too many questions.
Too many questions.
And we haven't even gotten to fragments yet, which other current Void nodes, Insatiable and Bloom, could potentially be candidates, but that leaves us with just 2, while Stasis has over a dozen, and I am not going to sit here and start thinking of new fragments, or I'll be here for hours, and I ain't got that kind of time. So, in a nutshell, we still know very little about what Void 3.0 is going to look like. However, I still want to share my dream build, even knowing that there will be aspects and fragments we haven't even thought of, which I'm sure will blow our minds. For PvE, I want to be able to combine the Cataclysm Nova Bomb, Overcharge Grenades, Bloom, Insatiable, and Devour. This would be the ultimate Void build, boasting terrific ad clear, AoE, single target burst damage, and survivability. The question is, will something like this be possible, or could there be even stronger builds? Bungie already mentioned we'll get a deeper look at aspects and fragments prior to launch, so we won't have to wait too much longer, as Witch Queen is just over a month away. Maybe then, we'll be able to start theorizing some actual builds. Until then, I bid you adieu.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.